I guess what we're trying to develop here at Servants is a little bit of a business culture where we encourage people, especially people who are new into business, really encourage you to talk to other people who are already in business and get to know other people who are already in business, because it will really help you not to make the same mistakes that I made. And if I can help you not make those mistakes, that will really bless me, because some mistakes that we made when we were younger seem obvious to me now, but they seemed like I was doing what I was supposed to do then. So we're just trying to get a bit of a culture of you guys talking with each other, getting to know each other, being open with each other about, where you're at, what you need, how you might need help. Do you have any advice here? Has this happened to you before? And it'll really, really, really help you on your business journey. So as I said earlier, Adriana and I started out in business about 24 years ago. And, we've worked very hard. We have worked very hard. Adriana and I put a lot of hours and a lot of effort into what we do. And basically, when we first started business, it was just simply to feed the family. We really just had to feed our children. I had no prospects of getting employed. I started a little electrical business, and basically, we just had to feed the family. We just had to pay the bills. We just had to get ourselves across the line week to week. And basically, we were hand to mouth every week. We were only just making it. And I began to think after a while that there must be a higher purpose to working. There must be a different reason why I'm doing this. There must be something higher that God's called me to. And I gradually, as I kind of leaned into God about work and why I was working so hard and why it was so difficult, I began to realise that work was actually a blessing. It wasn't a curse. And when I was younger, people used to say, we have to work because man was cursed at the Garden of Eden, because of original sin. And I used to think, no, I don't think that. I think I like to work, but I began to see that when I did work, I could feed my family. When I did work, I could pay the rent. When I did work, we could buy a home. When I did work, it brought me dignity, and it brought other people around me dignity. And so I started to realise that work was just such a blessing. To have work and to be able to work, it was a real blessing from God. And I began to realise that God blesses the work of our hands, so much so that God's actually ordained a task for all mankind to do. And it's actually to work. And it's spelled out very clearly in Genesis 1:28. And it says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground. And then also in Genesis 2:15 it says, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and keep it. So it was always been God's plan that we work. And so God did take Adam and God did put Adam in the Garden of Eden, and it wasn't to relax and to enjoy the beautiful garden, was actually to work, because Adam had to tend the crops and the fruit trees. They all need tending. You can't plant a fruit tree and expect it to look after itself. You can't plant grain and expect the grain to look after itself. So God basically put a challenge to man. And he said, basically the challenge to man was to subdue the earth. God's desire for man is to subdue this earth. Even after the flood, God said to Noah to subdue the earth. He said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. And again, he put the challenge before man to subdue the earth. Look, the earth is a wild place and it's not easily subdued. Like, just watch a few episodes of that show called Alone, right? And they put people out in wild places, and it's actually pretty tough to get food. It's pretty tough to build a house to live in. It's pretty tough to stay warm. And so it's not easy. It's not easy subduing the earth as God has commanded us to do. And so Because we don't live in an agricultural society, so we're not out gardening, we're not trying to subdue the physical earth, how does that look in our world? We're not an agricultural society, but we are still working. So how do we go forth and multiply and subdue the earth in our world? Well, I looked up the definition of subdue, and there's a couple of definitions, so I'll read two. And basically, the first definition is to bring under, to conquer by force, or the exertion of superior power, and bring into permanent subjection, to reduce under dominion and to vanquish. And I found another definition. It says to render submissive, to bring under command, to reduce to mildness or obedience, to tame. And so as business people, we're required to subdue the earth. We're required to subdue by exertion the playing field that God has put us in. And to subdue something can take a lot of effort. To subdue anything can take a lot of hard work. It can take many working hours and a lot of blood, sweat and tears. But when we do that, it's godly. It's a godly thing to work hard because God has commanded us to go out and work. Okay? And when we go out and work and we subdue the area or the playing field that God has put us in, we are doing a godly task. Look, recently I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago in Brisbane, and I'd been working so hard right up to there. We'd really been putting a lot of hours in at work. And I was starting to think to myself, am I the only one working hard? Because I look around and I wasn't getting the impression that everyone else was doing it too hard. But I was really edified when I got to the conference in Brisbane, and there must have been, there's 400 odd people there, so maybe there was 350 businesses or so. But everyone I spoke to worked hard. Everybody was working hard. And I have to tell you that I was really edified being at the conference if I just found out that everybody else was also working hard. So people with a Christian kingdom mindset, a kingdom mindset to drive a business, are going to work hard. It's the natural way. God didn't say it was going to be easy to subdue the earth. He didn't say it was going to be easy. He said to subdue it and to conquer it. And it's going to take a lot of effort. So don't be discouraged if you're working hard. Don't be discouraged if the task that God has put before you seems difficult. It seems like you're working really hard because you're required to subdue it. And to subdue anything takes a whole lot of effort. If all the subduing and the conquering came easy, then we don't really have to press into God. If it came easy, we're not crying out to God. If it came easy and fell in our laps, in fact, we'd probably forget who God was. We really grow as humans when we persevere at a task. I know some of the best things that have happened to me is that I've really had to persevere and to press into something and to not give up because it tests my mettle, it tests my resolve, it tests my commitment to the task that God has put before me. And then we begin to grow as humans when we see the fruit of our labours. We see the fruit of our hard work. It brings us dignity. It grows us. We see the fruit of our hard work and it goes down and blesses our children because we've been able to feed our children. We've been able to educate our children. We begin to see that the fruit of our hard work really is a blessing from God. And then we begin to see that God has a bigger plan for our lives. It's a much bigger plan than simply a plan for ourselves. Especially if He's called you into business or high levels of business. You may not necessarily own your own business, but you work in a high level in business. Michael mentioned something earlier before, and Leanne, that when you are successful in what God has called you to do, then you begin to have influence. And there's a whole lot of influence on the planet now, and a lot of it is negative. And God needs Christian people in businesses because if you can get yourself in a position of influence, then you can bring good influence into that area of work. So in my field, I know I have influence in my field. A lot of people know who we are. We've been around a long time. Okay, and as Michael said, here in this local area, people say hello to Michael, and yet he doesn't know who they are, but they know who he is. So now he is beginning to have influence. And I know that Michael and Leanne will bring good influence into the world. And so that's part of God's bigger plan. Is He puts us in a position of work. We begin to subdue the earth. We grow, we multiply, we expand out, and then we begin to have influence. And good, positive influence. Look, if I see myself just as a person who's working simply just for economic gain and to grow my own financial kingdom, then I've probably really missed the mark that God wants me to have. I've probably really missed the point of why God has called me into business. I need to see myself as a person working in a business that does need economics to drive the business, but I need to see God's bigger plan. One of the biggest shifters for me in my working life was when I realised that my business was my ministry, that my business was what God has called me to do, that my business is where I can minister into people's lives, where my business is a place where I can change people's lives, where I can have an impact on people's lives. And it took us a while to realise that to have a ministry, you don't need to be a pastor of a church or work in full-time ministry or go out to sub-Saharan Africa and work on a mission. You just need to do what God has called you to do and to do it very well and to treat it as your ministry and to treat everybody that God sends to you, whether they be suppliers or employees, as other people that God has sent to you that you can minister to. Adrian and I came to that realisation many years ago, and you know it's had a big impact on the way we run our business, and it's made us realise that everything we do every day in our business has eternal consequences. And so, if the reason for me having a business is just to grow economically and to buy more toys, then I'm not going to have eternal consequences. I'm not going to have influence on people that has eternal consequences. In 2 Corinthians 4 it says, "So we fix our eyes not what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." So if I'm just running a business for my own economic gain so that I can buy more toys, in fact, when I was young, we used to have a saying that he who dies with the most toys wins. Okay, but if that's my only driver, all of those things one day, they're temporal and they would just disappear. They'll just be gone. If my only goal is to have more money, more toys and more possessions. And so all those temporal things will fade away, but the things that I have done for eternal consequences will never fade away. So if we treat our business as a ministry that has eternal consequences, then whatever we sow into will remain forever. Okay? If we don't treat our business or our finances like that, whatever we sow into one day is temporal and will just be gone. Look, in our business, we've had many employees over the years. You know, they've all come and gone, but I know that we have had an impact on everyone basically who's come to work for us. And I know that it's been a positive impact simply because I run into people years later and I always feel the love from them, right? It's a really nice feeling and I feel so grateful to see young guys that we've trained and taught and brought up and introduced into the business world going out. They're going forth and multiplying themselves. And by all accounts, they're all doing very well. But I know that we've had the opportunity to sow into them with eternal words, with things that will last for them. I've also had many customers over the years that we've been able to build up relationships with. And in my world, in what we do for people, people need to trust us a lot because we create electricity. They can't be without electricity. I'm their go-to guy if their electricity fails. I mean, if your electricity fails at home, you ring Endeavour Energy, you get on the phone and trying to find out when your electricity is coming back. Well, I'm that person. And so we have to build up, and we have built up very strong relationships with our customers over the years. One guy I did a job for out at Cowra, he had problems with his system. I went out there, fixed it all up. He didn't have much money, so I kind of blessed him a bit. And then whenever I was going through Cowra, I'd drop in and see him, make sure things were going okay. Then I upgraded his system and all that kind of thing. But he developed cancer, this guy. And so then he used to ring me, and I'd be driving way out in the bush somewhere, and I'd see John's name come up on the phone, and he'd just be talking to me because he was dying of cancer. And I would pray for him on the phone. And he used to he grew up Christian, and then over the last couple of years of his life, he really, really got right into his Christianity again. And he would just ring me and talk about God. He was laying in hospital for months and months, basically dying, and would just ring me. Or the nurse would ring me and say, John doesn't talk to anyone else but you, like I was it. And so that was a really good, that's just one example. Another guy, this guy Peter up in Hunter Valley, he's currently dying of brain cancer. And he only ever went to church when he was young. I got talking with him one day. And I've been able to say to him on the phone, look, Peter, I'll pray for you, And I could hear his voice choke up. He just needed someone to say that to him. Even our accountant, last couple of years, had throat cancer. And we didn't see him for a year I thought he was going to pass away. Anyway, we were the first customers he came to see last year. And basically he just stood there and said, Greg, it's just amazing that you've recovered. And he's saying, I'm so blessed. And yet he hasn't been to church probably since he was a teenager. So we laid hands on him in our office, and he was so moved that somebody would pray for him. Okay? And he's been our same accountant for more than 30 years now. And so, that would have really blessed him. I don't know that there's too many other of his customers are going to be laying hands on him in their office. So we take it very seriously that our business is our ministry. So we use all our, we've been able to allow our finances to sow into the kingdom as well, okay? So, a big part of our motivation for actually working is that we get to sow into God's kingdom. And the things that we sow into, we know will have eternal consequences. And if you consider, if you read the New Testament and consider Joanna and Susanna from the Bible, I think in Luke 8, 1-3, it talks about Joanna as the wife of Chusa, the manager of Herod's household, and then goes on to talk about Susanna, who was helping to support them, being Jesus and the disciples, out of their own means. So these two women were supporting a ministry. They were sowing into something that had eternal consequences. And you have to think about Joanna and Susanna at the time that they were supporting Jesus, and basically to them, he was an itinerant minister, basically, walking around with 12 hungry men. It would have cost them an awful lot of money to keep them fed and housed. They would never have known the eternal consequences of where they were planting their finances, would they? They would never have known that we would still be here tonight talking about Jesus, but also mentioning them for having supported him in his ministry. So they for whatever reason, they realised that their finances were where they were sowing their finances was useful, but they would not have understood how important and the eternal consequences of the finances that they planted. So if you think it through a little bit, and if you think to yourself, well, if my business is a ministry, who am I working for? Well, if my business is a ministry, from my perspective, I'm working for a king. That's how I feel. I feel like I'm working for a king, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And if we take it really seriously that we're working for a king, it should come as no surprise to you that you've got to work really hard. So if I'm working for a king, I'm bringing my best game every day, because I'm the person that the king has looked through his realm and said, well, I want that guy working for me. And so that's a lot of pressure. You've got to bring your best game. to the king every day. When you come into that throne room and you tell the king what you've been up to, or he wants to know, well, what project are we doing today? You better be sharp about it, and you better be doing a really top job, because the king is going to know what you've been up to. The king has eyes everywhere. Okay? So if we take it really seriously, then it should come as no surprise that we are going to have to work hard. We are going to have to be diligent and honest at what we do. In fact, if you're not working hard in your business, I would think that there's something wrong. You know, if you tell me you're not working hard in a kingdom business, I would think, well, I'd really question what you're up to. And so, you know, just imagine if you were employed by the King of England, King Charles now. So you've got to bring your best game to him every day. Imagine if you're employed by the King of Denmark. The King of Denmark is a very intelligent man. He's going to see through you if you're not doing what he's called you to do, okay? So, you know, imagine if you're the king's personal builder, Joe. I mean, how well do you think you're going to be building for the king? You're building a new stateroom for the king. It's going to be extraordinary. He's going to want to know that he's chosen the right builder for the job, and you're going to be doing an extraordinary job, building what he's called you to do. Imagine if you're the king's cybersecurity guy. You don't want anybody hacking into the king's computer system. So you're going to do the best job, and you're going to do a better job than anybody else can do. In fact, you're going to make sure that you know every trick in the book that all these hackers know. You're going to make sure that you've tuned every system up so that there's no way anybody can hack in. You're going to make sure that he has an enormous firewall. There's no way anyone's going to get through. And that basically means you're going to have to bring your best game every day. If you're the king's accountant, you're going to want to make sure that the books aren't being diddled, because the king he's going to want to know where every dollar has gone. Okay? So, you know, you can't do a half-baked job. If you're serious about having a kingdom business, working for a king, you can't do a half-baked job. And so, as Christian business people, we're serving the King of Kings. And we're serving in a ministry that he's anointed us for. And like I said earlier, it's really amazing to hear everybody's different businesses. But you're all anointed to do that, okay? So I have no idea about cybersecurity. I can't do it. I have no idea about truck parts, except that I get very annoyed when things break down, okay? But you have the anointing for that. I certainly can't play a piano, but obviously Anna's anointed for that, okay? I certainly know nothing about media management, but somebody in the room does. But we're all anointed for different things. God has gifted us with all these different skills so that we can serve him at our best, okay? And in serving him, in the business that he gives us, he wants your business to be profitable. He wants your business to do well. He wants your business to succeed. See, God doesn't create things that don't succeed. God has never created anything to fail, okay? So God creates a fish. He put the swim in the fish and the fish swims. The fish is successful, okay? God creates a seed and the seed goes in the ground. The seed grows up and becomes a huge tree. The seed was successful. It wasn't a tree the day it was planted. It was just a seed. But with watering and nurturing, the seed becomes a huge tree. So everything that God makes is successful. And so God has called you into business. God anoints you in different areas and he gives you different skill sets to do things. He doesn't want you to fail. He wants you to be successful. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Because when we're pushed, the King gets the best out of us. When we're pushed, we have to turn to him and cry out to him for help, which is just how he wants it. It's just how he wants it. He desires relationship with you. And he gets that when we're pushed and stretched. He doesn't get it if it comes easy to us. And so that's why we work so hard. And that's why we work hard towards building great businesses. Because when we go out in the business world, when I go out and I do work out in the field and I make electricity for people or I solve complex electrical problems, I'm working there as an ambassador for the king, okay? So the king sends me out to a job, I go out and I do that job excellently, okay? And I should be able to do that job well because God has anointed me to do the task, but I go out knowing that I'm working for a king. In fact, for a long time now, like a lot of my work is hidden away in plant rooms, okay? And so no one has to see what I do sometimes. But our work is perfect. And sometimes we pull things apart and do it again because it's just not right. And in fact, a training organisation uses our work in photographs. So this is how a job should look. And then they point arrows at different things. But it's not me, it's God within me wanting to do excellent work because I'm working for a king and I know he's looking over my shoulder. So I don't take shortcuts. So the quality of the work and the integrity of my daily business activities brings glory to the king that I work for. And I don't want anyone to think of him any other way except that how they see me and they perhaps find out I'm Christian or they realise I'm different, that brings glory to my king. I worked for a guy about 7 years ago. He's a commercial irrigator, big company, and they needed to drive some pumps, but there's no power at this place where they drive the pumps out here at Richmond. They grow a lot of gum trees for the koalas at Taronga. And so he came to see me, and we had to build this system for him in a shed that would, drive all these pumps. And he came to see me, real solid guy, very direct, very, very businesslike, very forthright. Everything was contract, everything was down the line. No mucking around with this guy. I had to be there on this date, do the job. And we did it, got the job done. It made him look good to Taronga Park, and Taronga Park were one of his main customers. Anyway, after the job was done, it was all said and done and paid for. He dropped around to my office to see me. I think he just needed some paperwork or some documentation. And then we just got talking, and he said to me, "Are you guys Christian?" And I said, "Oh, Doug, why is that?" And he said, "Because of all the people that I deal with, you guys are the most different people I've dealt with for a long time, and I thought it could only be that you were Christians." And he turned out to be a Christian businessman. Anyway, we got talking, but I felt really edified that he had picked that up simply by the way that we had conducted business with him, and everything was right down the line, everything was honest, and we provided exactly what he asked for. Anyway, as it turned out, we became really good friends, and I've been a sailing partner of his, and we have beer o'clock sometimes on a Friday afternoon. But it really blessed me to know that, yes, the way we conduct ourselves out in the business world, it works. I'm representing my king. So Adrian and I we take it very seriously. So, I'm in the business of making electricity, and it's like, for example, Joe and Julie. Joe's in the business of souls, he told me once. I remember probably one of the first business meetings we had, Joe turned up, he says, "Oh, actually, I'm in the business of souls." And I said, "Well, that's a pretty good reason to be here." But think about this. See, Joe and Julie are working for the king as well. They've been working for the king ever since they started 40 years ago in community. They're working for the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And so Joe is growing community for eternal reasons. Joe has to bring his A1 game every day. Joe doesn't get to hide behind an office door hoping that no one will find out he's having a snooze. Okay? He's got to bring his A1 game every day because Joe takes it very seriously that he's working for a king. So every day Joe and Julie need to bring their A1 game. Okay? Now, if you looked at servants, if you just rolled up there one day and you thought it was a business, you'd say, actually, gee, this is a pretty big going concern here, beautiful building, everything's organised. And so Joe started off, I remember when I first joined servants, they just had a furniture truck, and now Now things are much different. So if you thought that that was a business and you looked at Joe and Joe's near retirement age, you say, gee, this bloke's actually, he's done a pretty good job here in this business called Servants of Jesus, okay? Even though we know it's not a business. But if you related that to a business activities, you'd actually say, gee, this guy, I mean, he's going to retire soon. He's actually going to do pretty well if he sells all this up and moves on, okay? But it's been Joe and Julie's intention to drive servants for eternal reasons. And Joe, I know, works very hard. In fact, he probably works harder than a lot of us would really know. And Joe and Julie put a lot of blood, sweat and tears into their ministry, much more than anyone would know. But it's been the long play. They've been playing the long game. And business is the long play. Business is the marathon run. There's no such thing as an overnight successful ministry or an overnight successful business. It's the same with us as business people. We also have the same duty to our King that Joe and Julie have had to the King in growing servants. We have the same duty to grow our businesses, just as Joe and Julie's example of growing Sodge. We have that same duty. We have that same duty to grow a successful business. We have that same duty to grow an honest business. We have that same duty to grow a business of integrity. We have that same duty to grow a place where people can come and work for us and be nurtured into life sometimes, if that's what it takes, or employ people, difficult people, and nurture them and grow them into a place where you know that they are now blessing their own families. We have that same responsibility in a ministry just as they do. And so I thought I'd just give you some one practical way. I can give you tons of practical ways to grow a successful business. I'll give you one tonight, okay? So one practical way. And it comes from Proverbs 22:29. And Adriana and I have been working on this for a long time. It says, do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings, with a small k. He will stand before kings and he will not stand before unknown men. In other words, Proverbs is telling us that if we excel at our work, as Proverbs tells us, as God tells us to work, if we excel at our work, we will not stand before unknown men. And this is something that Adriana and I have worked at for a long time, is to be really good at what God has called us to do, to be the best at it, to be a representative of our King, but to be the best at what God has called us to do. And I left school at 16 and I began an electrical apprenticeship. I wasn't very well educated. I did not do very well at school at all. I think, in fact, the school was happy to see me go, so I wouldn't embarrass them anymore. And fortunately, I got an electrical apprenticeship, but my intellect was quite low because I had some issues when I was a young kid, but my intellect was quite low. But I was really happy to get a job. I was just so happy to get an apprenticeship. And it was tough going and I worked hard, but I always thought I should just do the best that I can do. I should be really good at what I do. And the boss who taught me when I was an apprentice, he instilled that in me as well. And so even when then we started out in business 24 years ago, we started at a very low place. I did a lot of really low-level electrical jobs. And some of them weren't very pleasant. I remember crawling down into sewer pits and fixing sewer pumps because no other electrician would go and do it. I remember crawling under buildings all through Sydney, spider-infested, rat, dung, urine smelling underfloors in people's places. But I did it really well. You know, I did the best job that I could do, even though it was very low-level work, okay? And I always tried to do the best I could do. I remember sometimes I'd be crawling under floors with rats and it stunk. And I used to think to myself, Adriana has no idea what I do every day at work. I worked on some really miserable building sites and I worked on some really extreme heat, but I always kept striving to do the best job that I could do. In fact, Rachel, my daughter, was walking around Balmain a couple of weeks ago and she ran into an old builder and his wife that I used to do work for. And she recognised them and she said, oh, I'm Philip Leslie's daughter, blah, blah, blah. And they got talking with her. And somehow she got talking, oh, your dad helped me build a workbench last week and he said it wouldn't be anything special. But then she said, the builder's wife said, I bet it was perfect. And Rachel said, well, actually, it was pretty good. But the reason that she said that was she remembers that we did a really good job in everything that we did, even though it was low-level electrical work. I was grateful to get the work. I did the best that I could do. Adriana used to even clean people's houses when we were really struggling, just to pay the electricity bills. And she did the best job that she could do. Okay? And so we've always felt that we should continually strive to be the best that we can do and do the best job that we could do. Adriana's education level wasn't much better than mine at the time. But when we got started in business, she's resolved too to do the best job that she can do. And then as the revelation came to us for years that we're working for the King of Kings, we began to lean into God to keep growing our business and just to keep doing the best that we could do, and we were happy with whatever work that He sent us. Now, because we kept doing the best that we could do, we've got to a place now where we don't stand before unknown men. I mean, we will do any work that God sends us, but we do some extraordinary work, and we work for some extraordinary people. And I'm really amazed at the clients that God sends us sometimes. And we work for kings in industry. So we work for kings of finance, we work for kings of trucking companies, we work for kings in Sydney's building development market. But because we've been faithful and because we've always just tried to do the best that we can do, because we've continually been teaching ourselves and getting better at what we do, God has sent us some really extraordinary people. So Adriana's education has been low too, but over all these years, she's gradually learnt how to manage business, how to do business well, and she's actually got very good at it. You know, Adriana runs 2 businesses every week, and she's responsible for the returns of 3 companies to our accountant. But she didn't know all this when she started. Just like you guys were saying earlier, we're just kind of finding our way. Well, we have both had to find our way too, and it takes a long time. It's the long play. But we just resolved to do the best that we could do and to keep improving ourselves. And so we find ourselves in a position now where Proverbs 22 says that a man good at his work will stand before kings. So I guess that's the take home for you, especially if you're new in business and you're starting, is to lean into Proverbs 22:19. Lean into it. Where a man good at his work will stand before kings, and but it's the long play. And if you do that, you'll find that God will bring you extraordinary customers. Your king will send you out to do his work, and you'll be out there as an ambassador working for your king. Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. So it's a great encouragement. That should be an encouragement to you. But again, I would just tell you that it's the long game. It's the marathon run. It's continuous growth. It's continually pressing into God. It's continually seeing your business as a ministry. It's continually placing yourself before your King each day and asking him, what do you want me to do today? Send people to me and I'll bless them. Send people to me so that I can serve them. Guide me in how we spend our finances. And so I hope that message has been helpful to you this evening.